it's no secret that this is one of my favorite conferences of all time, and I know we do conferences for a living at the Conference Board. But when I was a practitioner for many years, I learned a great deal. I never met a good idea I didn't appropriate to take back to the ranch. So I'm very much looking forward to the next couple of days with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit. I know I love this kind of format. You know, it's 15 minutes. How bad can I be, right? So either I've left you with such a great impression you want to learn more, or the hook comes out, and either way, it's not too painful, so I'll do my best. But Kathleen and Larry are hard acts to follow, so I'll do my best. So what I thought I'd do today is share just a little bit about a recent report that we have just completed at the Conference Board. You know, I do now serve in a role where I oversee the research at the Conference Board, but anytime that I get a chance to talk about some of the topics that I'm passionate about, I spent a lifetime in talent management, particularly in engagement work and in leadership development, although I did have responsibility for end-to-end talent management. It's a real pleasure. So let me share with you a little bit about, well, most of that's true. Okay, so I wanted to share with you a report that just came out on executive coaching, and I had the good privilege to co-author this with Dr. Amy Abel and Sherlyn Nair, and this is our 10th issue. We've been doing this since 2006. It's actually been 10 years. We do it every other year, and it really is an opportunity for us to partner with those folks who head coaching programs at their respective institutions. They've joined our peer learning networks, we call them councils, and so we partner with them each year, not only to get their insights, but also to help shape the research. So I'd like to share with you just a few highlights, if I could. So the first thing I think I'd like to do is just sort of share a little bit about the report itself. As I mentioned, you know, we do this every other year. We do talk in the last couple of years about both internal and external coaching. And we talk about some case studies in this particular report. We had some great good fortune to have some folks partner with us. There are executive summaries, and I have the good fortune to have the link to access that for you, the executive summary specifically for the human capital space, available through the app, so thank you for that. And also, we've done some interactive charts where members of the Conference Board can benchmark, and we've also put together some diagnostic questions that'll help sort of shape your coaching or perhaps those programs led by your colleagues. You know, coaching matters a lot. When you think about the shortage of leaders, and there's several reasons why we're in a crunch, right? You have baby boomers running for the exit doors, not anywhere near as quickly as, you know, Gen Y wanted you to, but okay, we're still here, but some of us are still in the room, but on the way out. At least we know where the door is and we know where the handle is. But as they exit in droves, you also have, from the work that we know by our economists at the Conference Board, you have a productivity crisis that we're going to have for the next 10 to 15 years. You also have other challenges. You have people who will be needing to step into leadership roles perhaps long before they feel comfortable or before you do feel that they're comfortable. And also, you know, when we look at the fact that executive coaching has come a long way, when you get successful at it, people want more, and so there's more of an internal demand. So it's important to take a look at these things. It's also important because it's on the minds of CEOs. Every year we do a CEO Challenge report. I have the privilege of co-authoring that as well. We ask CEOs and C-suite leaders around the world, what are you going to do to handle some standard challenges like, you know, your human capital and customer service and operational excellence? And we ask them about their strategies. But we also ask them about some hot button issues. And they had a list this year in the 2016 report of 20 some odd options: cyber terrorism, currency risk, volatility, corrupting the government, you know, all the different international challenges that you can think of. You want to know what the top two were? The number one was developing and retaining top talent, and the second one was developing the next generation of leaders. And so it's important to CEOs, organizations should care. When you're developing leaders, executive coaching and internal coaching are some great things to think about as you move them through the pipeline. So a couple of things that might look like some of the findings of this year. Certainly there is a growth in the last few years to very much future-focused work. So when you think about what are the three top areas that coaching generally covers, it's generally, and we'll talk a little bit about the batting order, but it's generally developmental, so future-focused. It's 360-degree feedback or some kind of assessment feedback and the ability to put together a plan of action. And then it's also performance-focused coaching, which is the here and now. Those are generally the top three. So that push toward development for the future has been merged in the last couple of years. We continue to see that. It's targeted coaching. It's not a one-size-fits-all. These are very customized approaches. These are finding out how does this person fit into the larger talent management scheme of things? What's his or her trajectory? What are the kinds of things he or she needs to move into increasingly more responsible roles? Evaluation is pretty rudimentary. Now, I stand here as someone who's had the great privilege to partner a couple of times with Jack and Patty Phillips on a few books. So I'm a big ROI fan. I mean, I can do the whole thing and I'm good. But you know what? It's an area where I think our profession has perhaps not had the success we all wanted. And perhaps we have done a not so good job of supporting our profession in coming along to be more comfortable with that, generally speaking. That is not to discount the great work being done at places like Amazon and Google and a lot of other places, but I think a lot of people can spell analytics and less about it is being done than actually we might think or might hope. And that's one of the things that I have at the conference board is the opportunity to look into different organizations and see sort of where things are. But I would say that evaluation of coaching in this area is not as good as it could be. It's sometimes a mixed bag. Sometimes if you're using external coaches to augment, we'll talk about that in a moment, they sometimes have better and more rigorous structures, and there's more accountability for what's done. Internal coaching is where I think you're going to see much more growth. So 69% of the organizations who responded to our survey, and there were 181 organizations, 69% of them currently use internal coaches, and 69% intend to use coaching internally more so in the future. So they are seeing success there. But here's what's scary to me. About a quarter of them do not have any way to onboard those internal coaches. Another almost a quarter of them don't have any ongoing development. And 44% don't have any supervision of what's being done by the internal coaches. So when you think about the fact that there's not always the kind of return on investment calculations or even an opportunity to articulate the impact that your internal coaching program has had, think about what you start with, right? So I think that's a real opportunity there to think about internal coaching. Internal coaching usually focuses on the same three things. It's future-focused in terms of developmental coaching. It's the here and now in the performance coaching or 360. What's interesting about the internal is that they are doing more of the 360 feedback more so than external coaches. So that's a larger proportion of what they do. But when you think about how important those roles are, not to give them support, not to help them have guidelines, not to give them ongoing development, and not to have a level of supervision that lets you know what's going on, that's an area, I think, where people need to close the gap. There's been a rise in the pricing. We are now just crossed the average rate of $600 an hour for a CEO. And we have also seen a convergence of global rates so that around the world, people are more or less coalescing. And I think a lot of that is, first of all, the world is smaller, and secondly, many people have centralized this, and if they have a large global footprint, they're able to exert influence there. What I would also say is that there's a continuing reliance on internal coaching, and as I've mentioned, that continues to be the way of the future, I think. Not that external coaching will go away, but I think a greater reliance on internal coaching so that they can build a coaching culture. You know what, you might say, well, you know, great, let's do internal coaches because they don't cost anything. And that's really not the driver for this. It really is around cultural fit. It is around the seamlessness of the process and the ability perhaps to better weave this into someone's daily work. But cost was not the most important factor when people were thinking about internal coaching. I know there are some concerns. There are some people who do not want to have an internal coach. They have some things that they want to process, and they have some concerns about confidentiality. I'm not the first one to say that, but that's sometimes a factor. But when done well and with support and with guidance, internal coaching can be a very, very positive thing. Increased focus on developmental coaching, and I think that's because we are going to have to put people in leadership positions faster and with greater levels of responsibility than you might have otherwise have done. I'm also working on a millennial leadership project, and I'm working with 14 different organizations from their CEO, their C-suite, and their millennial leaders to try to determine whether or not millennial leaders are indeed inherently different from the cohorts of leaders that came before them. I will not tell you the surprise. I hope to come back here in the spring and share that one with you. But what's interesting to me is these millennial leaders, and they are just bumping up around 34, 35 years old. And some of the iconic companies where I had the great privilege to interview iconic CEOs and then their C-suite leaders and then the millennial leaders, when you listen to the job descriptions that they have and the incredibly technologically advanced, important, life-changing, world-altering things that they are doing, it is awesome. I wish that I could take that information and go to my broker and make some bets, but I can't. But it's so impressive, some of these people, and then you have to think, well, that company's going to be in good hands. But that's what developmental coaching will sometimes get you. Greater integration into talent management. You know, part of it is a lot of the data that's captured is not fed back into systems. Now, quite often a coaching assignment will be an outgrowth of someone's developmental concerns that they may have. It may also be on a succession planning or succession management track, and so you have certain needs that person needs to have. But quite often, another opportunity for improvement here is taking that data and actually using it. In most cases, people responded to us and said that that data remains very, very private. Okay? So that's perhaps another way to think about the good use of that data and whether or not that's something that could improve the overall leadership cadre. You know, we've been at this for 10 years, so a couple of things. Certainly there's been a move from coaching for the elite to coaching that's much more inclusive. And I was thinking about your comments earlier, Kathleen, when you were talking. You know, I think, well, you know, I've worked at a lot of different companies, and it's been wonderful to have different views. And I've worked at places where if you had a coach, that was the last thing that you had done for you before the SEC came and took you and did the perp walk. So, you know, then I've worked in other organizations where, you know, you'd got to be a vice president and someone would come into my office and said, "Where's my coach?" And I would say, that's just great. So it's very jarring. I also walked into one unnamed company and realized that people had retained their own coaches, and it was the wild, wild west, sometimes for 6 figures. I think it's wonderful. If you want to pay for Rent-A-Friend, you just do it on your own dime. That's it. So anyway, we've moved a long, long way. We've centralized it in most instances. It's been standardized. There's a certain approach. About the only thing that the business unit still does is pay for it. Generally, the structure, the strategy, the process, all of that's done centrally. The standards for coach qualifications have really come a long way in the last 10 years. Certainly, external certifications are very important. I would say the most commonly cited one that we hear about is ICF. But there are also interesting things that people are doing to certify their own coaches. For example, one of the profiled organizations we had in this report is Maybank, which is one of the largest banks in Southeast Asia, headquartered in Kuala Lumpur. And they have 1,000 people that they've certified internally, and they are looking to cascade internal coaching throughout. And that's exactly what they're doing. They actually have people who are full-time coaches, which is fairly rare still for internal coaches. Most people do this as part of their day job as an HRBP or whatever the case may be. Their coaching needs to align with business strategy, and in the best shops, that's what you see. For example, we've profiled MD Anderson Cancer Centers, and they were looking to help physicians better understand the business environment as the world changes around them. And so what they did is they used coaching to help those physicians better understand the business demands so that they could drive a different type of business. L3 Communications was also profiled. There was sequestration, and a lot of their federal dollars dried up a little bit. They decided they need to have a global footprint, and they had to help their folks understand how it was going to be to play on that kind of a stage. I would say the other thing is scale, and that's one of the big drivers for internal coaching, is to build an internal culture and to have a cadre of internal coaches. That's what's really driving that, so that people understand how to use coaching and how to use it in different settings. You know, we've seen a lot of shift in the last few years from companies who were very much in the forefront around performance management, and particularly something very, very structured. You've seen them shift away into something that starts to look like more like managerial conversations. Now, one of the things that we know about coaching is that those who do it well and have leaders who are engaged, because there is a correlation, for example, in the instance of MD Anderson, in their program, they have a 90% engagement rate versus 46% for other physician leaders through some of the coaching work that they do. So we know it matters, we know it can be done well, and we know that a lot of people would find this a tremendous benefit if we can kind of crack the code on how to do it. You know, my 15 minutes are almost up. Hopefully the hook's not out yet, but I will say this. If there's something more you'd like to learn about it, I have a couple of things here. One is if you have any trouble getting the access to the report, I'll also be happy to make my slides available. And also, if you're interested in some of the work we do around engaging leaders, happy to share that as well. So I'll stop there, but thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit.